Welcome to another episode of Seeing Them Live, a podcast featuring memorable concert stories from live music fans. Everyone has a concert story, and hopefully, one day, we'll hear yours. And now, we'll hear Dawn's.
I've been to 26 Soraia shows since April of 2022. That one is probably, I can't pick one favorite, but it's definitely in my top three because of how intimate of a setting it was, how close I was to the band.
Dawn Fontaine is an executive assistant in the neurobiology department at UMass Chan Medical School in Worcester, Massachusetts. She likes watching horror movies, listening to vinyl records, cooking, hanging out with her cat, and seeing live music. Lots of live music, which is what we're going to get to here in a minute. Her love for music goes back to when she was a child. Growing up, Dawn listened to many different genres of music. She enjoys a lot of her mother's favorite artists like Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Johnny Cash, Patsy Cline, and Dolly Parton. Dawn is also a big fan of her father's favorite band, the Rolling Stones. She even has his original vinyl copies of Sticky Fingers with the working zipper on the cover and Let It Bleed. Her father also is into classical music, and she grew up listening to Beethoven, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, and others. Her brother's music collection also exposed her to bands like Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, Quiet Riot, and Billy Idol. Dawn also listens to a lot of Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Michael Jackson, David Bowie, the Sex Pistols, and Nirvana. Dawn, welcome to Seeing Them Live.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Love talking music.
Yeah, and I thought, we usually start, go in chronological order, so we start at the very beginning. And you had told us that your first concert was when you were 16 years old, and you saw the Offspring in 1995.
Yep.
That was your first concert, and it was for the Smash tour.
Mm-hmm.
And you went with one of your friends whose mother dropped you off at the show. So if you want to just chat about that for a bit.
Yeah. So I believe Smash had come out the year before. And at the time, Green Day and Offspring were like the two bands that everybody was listening to. And my friend had said, hey, the Offspring are going to be playing kind of a local show in Worcester, which is just a couple towns over from us. And she's like, I think I can get tickets. And I'm like, okay. I actually found the ticket stub because I was curious just to see the information on it. And it was February 28th of 1995 at the Worcester Auditorium. It was a general admission show, and the ticket only cost me $13.50, which
Oh my God.
I don't think you can get a ticket anywhere.
Now, you can't even buy a beer for that much, I think, anymore.
Now, I had to tell you, the show really had an impact on me. First of all, it was my first show. I also got to see what a mosh pit is like. I kind of avoided that because that was a little intimidating. But it was just the music and hearing live music and seeing the band live that you really like. And it was really exciting. We had a great time. I think I probably talked about it for months after that. And that was my first show. The Worcester Auditorium is no longer a venue. It's just an old building now, but it was a small venue. I'd say kind of like one of those places that probably had a capacity of like 2,000 or 3,000. So it was a kind of an intimate setting.
Yeah. Because what I noticed in doing some research on that tour is the Offspring played two nights, February 26th and 28th.
Mm-hmm.
And they also played two nights in Chicago at the Aragon Ballroom, which I believe holds about 3,000 people. Mm-hmm. And those were the only two cities, I think, on that entire tour where they played two nights. So they must have had, a good fan base where you were located, and then in Chicago as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
And it was a weeknight show, which I thought was interesting. Said on the ticket, it was a Tuesday night show. So first of all, I'm amazed my parents let me go to a show on a school night. But second of all, I remember there being a really big crowd. Like it looked like it was sold out. So,
Sure.
going to shows, usually Fridays and Saturdays are your show nights. But yeah, for a Tuesday night, it was a good crowd.
And then I was going to ask you, Don, was that like, did you go with your friend to other shows and their mom like drop you guys off at other shows?
No,
That was kind
no,
of a one
that was a one-time thing.
Okay.
Because the next show I went to after that was December 28th of 96. That was my first big show. I saw Kiss. The original members had reunited for a tour in the mid-90s. And I saw them at the Worcester Centrum Center, which is now called the DCU Center. And this is also going to shock you. I have that ticket stub, and that ticket only cost $29.50. And I don't think you can get a Kiss ticket for probably under $300. I know they just did farewell tour. But and we had balcony seats, and that show I attended with my older brother Dave, who was also a Kiss fan. So that was a different, totally different atmosphere because they had the inside like fire shooting up, and you've got these bands coming out and the makeup. And I think between the Offspring and seeing Kiss, that's when I got hooked, and I'm like, okay, I need to definitely, start going to more shows. And at that point, I had just turned 17 and I had a car, and I had a job, so I was able to, start saving up for going to shows.
Yeah, because we did a Concert Mom episode, and we talk about how there's this 4-year window between when you're like 12 and 16 that your mom would take you to shows, or but once you get your driver's license, you don't want your mom tagging along with you necessarily.
Right.
So I thought we would one other concert you highlighted after this Offspring show, which is, if we jump ahead, like looks like 20 years, 2015, to a Billy Idol show at the Orpheum Theater in Boston, where you had some pretty good seats. If you want to talk about that concert.
Yeah, definitely. So that was January 31st of 2015, and I had bought the VIP seats. So that offered you a meet and greet with Billy Idol and Steve Stevens after the show.
Oh.
I had gone with a friend, and we were second row center. The Orpheum Theater is a very, very old theater, another small capacity. I think it might even be less than 3,000. It might be like around 2,500, and really incredible, intimate setting. I mean, to see Billy Idol that up close, and it was, he played all my favorites like White Wedding and Rebel Yell.
Yeah.
And I started following him from when I was a kid because I grew up in the 80s with MTV. So I used to see all his videos. So I always wanted to see him. And at the end of the show, it was after they did their encore, the band kind of all walks up to the stage, in front of the stage to do a bow. And Eric Eldenius, the drummer, had his 2 drumsticks, and he was just kind of looking at the audience, and we locked eyes, and he just handed his drumstick to me.
Nice.
And that was just like, oh, this is really cool. So that was the first of what's now many drumsticks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely like the most famous person I've gotten one from. But yeah, that was really cool. And then after the show, meeting Billy Idol and Steve Stevens was incredibly cool too. I mean, it was almost like I wouldn't say I was starstruck, but I was just like, I couldn't think of anything to say other than like, oh wow, great show, Yeah, they were incredible. That was a very memorable show. That would definitely be, because Soraia is always going to be my favorite, but outside of Soraia, probably the best show I've seen, my favorite show I've seen aside from them, because I think because it was the setting, being in the Orpheum Theater, being that close.
Yeah.
I always keep an eye out to see if other bands are playing there, because, it'd be a great place to see. I heard the Rolling Stones played there like 20 years ago. That must have been insane. I can't even imagine what that would have been like. But yeah, that's a really just a great place. And yeah, that was a very memorable show, and a great year for me for seeing live music in 2015.
So that kind of kicked off your drumstick collection.
But I didn't restart the drumstick collection until just 2022 when I
Oh,
really got
okay.
hardcore into going to the
Yeah.
shows. Because as
Okay.
you can see, I went to those shows in the 90s and I went to a few scattered shows in the early 2000s. 2015 was obviously Billy Idol, and then I know we're going to talk about Joan Jett.
Was that the same year, Dawn? I figured it because it was at I think a Who concert. She opened for a Who concert in 2015. So that
Yeah.
same year with Billy Idol.
Yep. So that was May 24th of 2015.
Okay.
She opened for The Who, and that was at the Mohegan Sun Arena in Uncasville, Connecticut. So that was a pretty good size venue. I mean, people are going to say this is crazy. I wasn't really excited about seeing The Who. No disrespect. I like their music and
Yeah.
everything, but
Mhm.
I have been a huge Joan Jett fan since I first saw her on MTV. She's probably one of my top 3 favorite artists.
Okay.
And I had a connection through a colleague at the time who had a connection with somebody who worked like with the production crew on her tour, and they were able to connect me with someone there, and they said, you can meet her before the show. So of course that was also an incredible experience, but the show, it seemed like it went by so fast because the openers only get like 30 or 45 minutes, and she fit in, all of her hits, I Hate Myself for Loving You, Bad Reputation, I Love Rock and Roll, and Cherry Bomb. I mean, I was singing along to all of them. I had great seats. I was in to the left of the stage in the first level. So I had pretty good view of the stage. And, that was great, but I mean, after I saw her and I saw The Who, I walked out of there saying, "I've gotta see Joan Jett as a main headliner," because that was just kind of a tease, only seeing her for like 30 minutes. I mean, I know when she headlines a show, she does about 90 minutes. So, yeah, but that was an incredible show.
So then did you see her then after that again? Because I know we're going to talk about the time when you saw her in April 16, 2022, but
Mhm.
between that 7-year gap, did you see
Nope.
her again?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, no. There was a kind of a break from going to shows. I had some major life changes. Through a divorce, I moved out of state. I had met someone else, started a new career. The Joan Jett show was originally supposed to be in April of 2020, but the pandemic hit in March.
Yeah.
So it just kept getting pushed back.
So there's a 7-year period there, where finally you get to see her after the pandemic, and you go to this concert, and the opening act is this band out of Philadelphia called Soraia.
Mhm.
You described it as a life-changing event, and I just want you to, if you could, just kind of tell your story about
Cool.
that whole experience.
I'm just gonna tell you, this is why I follow music the way I do, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today, if I hadn't experienced Soraia, because it wasn't so much, I say life changing, they saved my life.
Okay.
It was that incredible. I mean, so, to give you a brief overview, when I had moved to New York in 2017 and I had started a new life, I was living with my girlfriend of 5 years, and she was only 52 years old, and she died of cardiac arrest. Suddenly, never saw it coming. It was completely unexpected. And after she had passed in December of 2021, I was really just severely depressed, didn't want to go anywhere, didn't want to go to anything. And I knew the show was happening in April. And I was like, I'm not going to go, not going to go. And a friend of mine that I worked with, Gregory, he was a Joan Jett fan. He had seen her back in the 80s. And, he had kind of encouraged me. He's like, it'd be good to get out of the house, and I was like, okay, all right, and it was like, who's the opening act? And he's like, I don't know, some band called Soraia. And I'm
Mm.
like, okay, because I don't usually care about the opening acts unless it's for a big band like the Rolling Stones, because they usually have a pretty established artist. Like I saw them play with the Pretenders and Sheryl Crow, but like Billy Idol, I couldn't tell you who his opening act was. So, I was like, well, let's go check it out. I did look up Soraia. I saw they were a female fronted band, and I'm like, oh, I'd heard the name Joan Jett come up, and I'm like, okay, associated with them as like one of their singers, like, artists that inspires her and that she's a fan of. So I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to like this band. And they came on the stage, their first song, which was Dangerous off of their Dig Your Roots album. And I think my jaw just hit the floor. I was just mind blown. I mean, they were so good. They put on a heck of a show. Every song was incredible. And, after they were done, I mean, I had good seats. I was probably about 25 rows, floor seats. So I had, it was great sound. It was at the Palace Theater, a small venue in Albany, New York. And at the end of their show, Zuzu Mansour, their singer, had said, come by the merch tables. The band will be there and we'll talk and sign autographs and stuff. And I don't usually do that kind of stuff at a show. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go check it out. I might want to buy an album or something. So I went over and I met, first I met Travis Smith, their bass player, and Brianna Sig, the drummer, and chatted with them briefly and got a picture and was looking at the merch. And then I walked over and saw my friend Gregory, and I was like, all right, well, that was cool. Let's go back to our seats. And he's like, oh, well, don't you want to talk to the singer? She's right over there. I didn't see her. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go talk to Zuzu. It'd be really cool to meet her as well. And she was really cool. I can't remember exactly the conversation. It was probably something like, hey, great show. I enjoyed your music. She was very down to earth, very nice. I got a picture with her. And then went to my seat and I watched Joan Jett absolutely just tear the roof off the place. I mean, she did a 90-minute set. The last 20 to 30 minutes, she did acoustic music because she had just released that album Change Up where she did a bunch of her songs acoustically. It was her first time doing it live acoustically. Every single song she did was incredible. She was great. She was everything I had ever wanted to see. But what's funny was after that show, all I found myself thinking about was Soraia. Like, wow, they were so good. I really want to see them again. And I'm thinking, they must be opening for other bands or have other shows going on. And that week after the show, my whole demeanor changed. I just was happier. I didn't feel as depressed. The music just really changed me and I felt better. And so I decided to look up their other tour dates, and they had some shows coming up in May. The next one was actually on my birthday in Pauling, New York at Daryl's house, which is owned by Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates. And I was like, oh, well, that'd be really cool to go to a show. And it's on my birthday, see them. And it's not like a show where they're opening for anybody. They were touring with two other bands off of their label, the Kurt Baker Band and Ryan Hamilton.
Okay.
I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And because Pauling, New York's not far from Albany. And I was like, all right, I'm good. And it's been a week since the show. And I'm like, you know what? I want to send a message to Zuzu and just thanking her for the show and doing what she does and meeting with the fans after. And I kind of just gave her a little background of what had happened with the loss of my girlfriend a few months before and how depressed I was. I wasn't going to go to the show. And I did. And it really lifted my spirits and made me feel good and made me feel happy. And I said to her, I'm going to go to your show on my birthday in Pauling, New York. And I also mentioned to her how much I liked the album, the Dig Your Roots album. There's a song on there called Still I Rise that really stands out. That is one of my favorite songs. And I didn't expect much of a response. I mean, I messaged her on Instagram and I wasn't really that active on Instagram at the time. And I figured, okay, if she'll either like the message or she might just send something back saying thank you. I think it was like a few hours later, I got a super long, detailed message from her. It was just thanking me for writing her, how much it made her day, how happy she was that, the music made me feel good and lifted my spirits. And she said that absolutely we could meet and talk after the show in Pawling, New York. And she was going to give me a copy of the Still I Rise single on vinyl.
Mm.
And it was just a really nice, lot more than I ever expected in a response. And it just made my whole weekend, I should say, until the next day, which is when my life took a really dark turn. And it's interesting that I'm talking to you guys about this now, because I had another person who wanted to interview me about this about a year ago, but it was still too raw and too hard for me to talk about. I had told some people the story through messages and stuff. Actually, I told Zuzu in a message and some other people, but that day after, I was living in the house that my girlfriend had owned, and I knew I was going to have to move out because we didn't have anything in my name. And I was okay, and I got a call from her mother, and I went over to see her per their request, and didn't have a good relationship with them. They didn't like their daughter because she was gay, and I didn't expect the meeting with her parents to go as bad as it did, because they were pretty cordial to me during the whole process of her burial and everything. They said, I won't go into full detail, but they said some very ugly things that shouldn't be said to any human being, that were very hurtful. And I was in a very vulnerable state. I was still hurting a lot from the loss. And when I left their house that evening and I went back to my house, to the house I was living in, I felt completely destroyed, like I had nothing left. I thought they were maybe two people that I could possibly have in my corner, even if we weren't going to be close. But the way they treated me was absolutely horrible. And on my way back to my house, I made 3 phone calls, 2 to some friends and 1 to a family member. And of course, none of them answered. So that made me feel more alone.
Mm.
And, I know I had told you guys that the music pulled me out of a dark depression. It pulled me out of moments away from suicide. I had just given up. I mean, Jen was my whole life, and then to have, the 2 people that I thought would be in my corner, even though they didn't have a good relationship with their daughter, I thought they'd still show some support, and they weren't. I just felt alone. So I went in the house and I wrote letters to my family, to my brothers and my mom. And then I grabbed a bottle of oxycodones, I believe it was, that were left over from a back surgery that my girlfriend had had years ago, and a bottle of Benadryl. And I was going to take, I think there was 9 or 10 oxycodones of the Benadryl. I was just going to do it, fall asleep, and be done. And how the music comes into this is I had written the letters, gone outside, put them in the mailbox. And this is a Sunday. So I was waiting for those to go out the next day. And I went back in the house. I had the pills in my hand, and it was eerily quiet. Normally, when I'm in the house, I have something on for background noise, usually the TV, or I'm playing a record. But I had just come home and I didn't have anything going on. So the quickest thing for me to grab was my cell phone. And I just put on Apple Music. And the last thing I was listening to, the last band I was listening to was Soraia, the Dig Your Roots album. And what song came on? But Still I Rise.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to the lyrics. And I don't know what it was. I don't know, but at that moment, it was just like a few seconds, but it seemed like longer. Something just clicked in my head, like, what are you doing? What the heck are you doing? I mean, why, I was thinking back to the great time I had at the show, the interaction I had with Zuzu, the message I got from her, and what I was looking forward to seeing the band again. And I'm like, I have so much to live for. What am I doing? What the heck am I doing? And so I threw the pills away and I texted my brother, Joe, and I said, you need to call me. It's an emergency. And he did. And then to make a long story short, 4 days later, we had a U-Haul packed up with all my belongings. I quit my job, took my 6 weeks of vacation time and moved back home to Massachusetts. And that was like April 28th, and came home, and, it was a rough first week home. It was a lot of stress getting settled in and not having a job and looking for, even though I had 6 weeks to find one. But my birthday was coming up on May 8th, and I was still going to go see Soraia, even though I was living in Southbridge, Massachusetts. Pauling, New York's a little bit further away, but I booked a hotel room and I made the trip out there by myself. And when I got to the venue, it's a venue that when you go in, it's also a restaurant. So they have tables seated for 4 and for 2, and then the stage. And I asked if I could sit in front of the stage, and they said, no, those are tables for 4. So I sat a little further away from the stage, and I saw a woman had come in by herself, and I'm like, oh, I invited her to sit with me, just somebody to talk to. And she had seen Soraia, I don't know if it was the night before or a couple nights before, in New York City with the same bands, because they were doing like a run of 4 shows. And she was a big Ryan Hamilton fan, but she's like, oh yeah, she's like, I thought Soraia was great too. And she asked me how I had seen them, and I told her about the Joan Jett show. Well, as soon as I said Joan Jett, there was a couple sitting at the table behind us, and the woman's head spun around, and she's like, we were at that same show. And that is 2 people that I can now, are fellow Soraia fans. I'm also happy to call friends, Ken and Bonnie. They live in Rhode Island, and they had come up for the show. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Now there's 4 of us. I went and saw that lady at the front of the building, and I'm like, can we move now to the front stage? Because literally there was a table right in front of the singer's microphone, like right there. So she's like, yeah, sure. So the 4 of us sat together, and, I think Ryan Hamilton had come on first. He didn't have a full band with him. He did like an acoustic set, and he had a keyboard player, and he was incredible. And then the Kurt Baker band came out there, kind of a rock pop kind of sound, incredible band. But I was just, eager to see Soraia. That's who I was there to see.
No.
And, wow. Seeing them that close was like, yeah, it was incredible. I can't even tell you. I mean, it was definitely probably one of I've been to 26 Soraia shows since April of 2022. That one is probably, I can't pick one favorite, but it's definitely in my top 3, because of how intimate of a setting it was, how close I was to the band. And then after the show, I got pictures with all of them. I got, in addition to getting the copy of Still I Rise, I also bought the Dig Your Roots on vinyl, the album. I got a copy of the set list. They autographed everything for me. It was incredible. And the fact that I had met some fellow fans, and it was great. No. I remember driving back to my hotel afterwards, and I'm like, I have to go to the last show on this tour. They've got one more show coming up. It was May 13th in Clifton, New Jersey, at a tiny sort of like bar/venue called Dingbat. And I'm like, I got to go to this. I'm not working. Well, why not? So I ended up doing that. I ended up going home from that show, and a week later went to Clifton, New Jersey to see them. And the woman that I had sat with at the previous show happened to be there, because she, again, is a big Ryan Hamilton fan. And so we met up there, and again, just a fantastic experience. And I didn't just like hang out or talk with just Soraia after the show. I also interacted with Kurt Baker's band, especially their drummer, Craig Sala. He's in a few other bands, and it was just really nice. And at the time after the show, I believe it was Zuzu, she said to me, we're doing another show tomorrow in New Jersey. It's a small one. It's going to be acoustic only. It was for WDHA radio station in New Jersey was having an event, like a dog adoption event at a car dealership. And they wanted that, I guess the band that was supposed to play had dropped off. So they asked Soraia to come in and do a few songs. And I'm like, well, I think it was, I have it written down here. It was Rockaway, New Jersey. Before I went, I forgot to mention at the shows, especially the one I went to in New Jersey, I took a lot of photos and I recorded a video of the first song that they played. And I posted it on my Instagram and my Facebook, and I tagged the bands. And I got a lot of positive feedback from my friends, my family. They're like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And that also started to become a way you probably found me on Instagram as well. Every show I go to now, I post photos and videos from it. And I did the same thing at the Rockaway, New Jersey show. I think they did 3 songs. I recorded 2 of them. They did Tight Lipped and Wild Woman, and it was acoustic and it was incredible. That show, again, even though it was only 3 songs, it was still just great seeing them. I remember driving back home, and it was just like, I was just so happy. I was feeling good. Everything just turned around for me after that. I got a fantastic job at UMass Chan Medical School, and I just started going to shows. I mentioned to you I had talked to the drummer at the time for the Kurt Baker band, Craig Sala, and he had told me, I'm in a couple other bands, and he sent me the flyer for one of them, and he was doing a show at Cafe 9 which is in New Haven, Connecticut, with a band called The Worst, and they're based out of Portland, Maine, and a fantastic punk band. And after I posted the photos and video from that and tagged them in it, I started to pick up followers that were like mutual friends with the bands and one of them was Dave Strong, who's a punk rocker from Portland, Maine. And so he was doing a show in Connecticut. I'm like, I'm going to go see him and check him out. After that, which that was literally like, maybe a month after the last Soraia show, at the Dave Strong show, I saw 2 incredible punk bands, which I call probably my 2 favorite ones right now that I go to see quite often. They're out of the New Haven area in Connecticut. One of them's called the Resistors, and the other one's called Mitch Kramer. And they started doing shows, a couple, like every month or so they'd have a show somewhere, but they'd be playing like 3 or 4 other bands. And I ended up liking those bands like Peasant and Cry Havoc and The Last Survivors, Jared Knappich. I could go on and on naming them. And that led me to wanting to go. I started following all these bands, and that led me to starting to go to a show every weekend. The next Soraia show was that July, Long Island, New York. I made the trip. It was a Friday. I took the day off from work, made the trip. It was at the Paramount Theater. They were opening for a band, a Queen cover band called Killer Queen. And, again, it was incredible. I had a great time. I mean, I saw the band after the show. That's really where it all started. After that, it became a thing. Now I'm going to go to a show every weekend, sometimes 2, and take pictures, post the videos. I let the bands use it any way they want. I just do it I like the videos and the pictures for myself, because even though I had moved back home and the music had kind of healed me, I was still going through some, grief from my loss. And I would just watch the videos during the week or look at the pictures on my phone, and it would just make me feel good. And it would make me feel excited for whoever I was going to see that following weekend. I just looked forward to going to shows, and I started meeting people at these shows. I see a lot of the same fans that go to the shows. So, like, because some people would say to me, well, you go to these shows by yourself? Is that even fun? I'm like, oh, it's a blast because I know people there. I know people in the audience. I know the bands.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changed. My whole life has changed so much. And I saw that year from April of 2022 to the end of 2022, I saw Soraia 10 times.
Okay.
I saw them like 4 times in November, and then I drove out to Philadelphia and went to their album release show that December, where they did their latest album, Bloom, front to back, plus a bunch of other songs, and it was a 90-minute set. It was just incredible. They filmed a music video there, so all the fans that were like right up in the front are in it. So I think I'm in like 8 different shots of the video, which is pretty cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
It hasn't stopped. I mean, so 2023 came along and I just started planning out my shows, and Soraia holds the top spot. I mean, that band will always hold a special place in my heart because I think of them and it's like, well, I'm still here because of them. The music really changed me, saved me. I'm just so grateful. I mean, I'm already looking forward to seeing them. They've got a few shows coming up the end of April. I'm going to be going to all 3 of them, a couple in Connecticut, one in New Jersey. I mean, there's no question. I go everywhere to see them. I saw them 16 times last year in 7 different states.
Yeah. I was going to get into that a little bit with you, Don, but first I want to thank you for sharing that entire story. And I'm sorry for your loss. And that was a really compelling story. And I appreciate it. When you're talking about seeing these bands, and we had a guy on, I don't know if you listened to the episode, his name's Roger Merlo.
I did listen to it.
We titled it London's Notorious Gig Master.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have a really similar story. I mean, he was struggling as well. And then there was this like gateway concert that he went to, which Doug, I think it was Joan Baez maybe, that he had seen. And then
Yep.
he started to go to all these concerts. And I think the only difference between you and Roger is Roger's retired. So he can go out during the week and
Right.
you got to do this over the weekend. But, yeah, just some of the similarities I'd written down, you both keep, like he kept this or still keeps this book of bands.
Mm-hmm.
He's 75 years old. He just celebrated a birthday actually. Where you keep a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, I started with a notebook, but once I started adding shows and it started to become like a weekly thing, it was getting to be kind of messy. There was all these scribble outs here and there. And then when I started traveling to go to different states, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to do this differently. So that's, when I went into Microsoft Excel spreadsheet program, created a spreadsheet, and now I can sort it by band, date, state, venue. I can total up how many times I've seen a particular band, and that's just made it a lot easier for me to keep track of it. Like I told you last year, I saw 152 bands.
Yeah.
Went to 74 shows at 40 different venues in 8 different states.
Yeah. And I did some math on that as best I could. And I have you going to a show, a little over 2 shows every weekend. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well,
most of the time. There was a couple weekends I missed. Like I usually didn't do the weekend after Thanksgiving, and then usually the weekend of Christmas and the weekend of New Year's. There's just not a lot of shows going on then because everybody's taking a break for the holidays. And then I think I missed a weekend in February because I was sick with a cold. Yeah. And it pretty much, a trip came down to every weekend, some weeks 2 or 3 shows. Because if Soraia was coming around and doing a Northeast run of like 4 shows in a few different states, I would just take like the week off from work and plan. I go to every show.
You drive to these shows, I would imagine?
Yep. Yeah. I've driven as far south as Philadelphia and as far north as Portland, Maine to see them.
Yeah, because Roger, he has to do public transportation around London and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I was assuming you were driving to all of these shows, and I was going to say, Don, we were looking at Soraia's website, and they're playing in Chicago on September 20th at a place called the Liars Club, which I've never been there. It looks like a really cool place, though. So I think Doug and I are going to be at that show.
Yeah, you kind of turned us on to that band.
That's very cool.
Yeah, we're going to try to recruit some of our seeing them live local guests here and see if we could get a group going. So
awesome.
If you want to add to your distance record and want to drive out to Chicago, we'd be happy to meet you there and check them out.
I'd love to meet you guys and see them live with you. Would be great.
I had a question. You had written in your notes here that you met Stephen Van Zandt.
I did.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because apparently Soraia is on his record label, yes. Wicked Cool Records.
Yes.
And so can you tell us a little bit about meeting Stephen Van Zandt?
Yeah, he was at their show I went to this past November at the Berlin Under A in New York City. And after the first band played, I went to take a break and I was going to go over to the merch table and I saw him there. He was just kind of standing in the back and he had his wife Maureen with him and he had just gotten done talking. Kurt Baker was there and he had talked to Kurt and I was like, oh man, I've got to go and introduce myself and thank him for signing Soraia to his record label. And I didn't get a chance to tell him my whole story, but I did tell him that their music saved me and how much it meant to me and how much I appreciated him signing them, Soraia to his label. And he was, very happy to hear that. And it was very cool meeting him. And then also if you listen to his, he has a radio station on Sirius XM, Little Steven's Underground Garage. If you listen to that, you'll hear Soraia on there a lot. Probably them almost every day if I'm listening to that. But yeah. So that was really cool. All my friends that were there at the show with me, we all got pictures with him and stuff. It was very cordial and nice. And yeah, it was just added to the memories of that show.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So as we're approaching the end, Dawn, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add or plug or talk about or.
No, I mean, going to a show tonight in Windsor, Connecticut to see some great punk bands. I'm looking forward to that. And I pretty much have shows booked the rest of this month and going into March and April. If anybody wants to see any of the bands I follow, they can just go onto my Instagram or my Facebook and follow me. I literally post the video of usually every band that I see, and then I sometimes take photos as well and post those. So, I know I have some followers that go there just for that. They like to see the pictures and stuff I post. But thank you for having me. It was really nice to be able to tell that story. I'm hoping that, people realize how healing and therapeutic music can be, because that's what it is for me. It's sort of like a therapy. It's like, I'm going, and as soon as I hear the music and I see the bands and I see my friends there, I'm just so happy and I feel so good. I have Soraia to thank for that because they started this whole journey.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting story. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you on seeing them live, and we appreciate your time and coming on. And yeah, maybe we'll meet up sometime.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That's a wrap for our show. I want to thank today's guests for sharing their concert stories with us. Make sure to check out our show notes at seeingthemlive.com for links to websites, photos, and other artifacts mentioned in the show. I also want to thank my producer, Doug Florzak. The theme music for the show was composed by Doug and is featured on his album, Flagstone. If you have a concert story you'd like to share on our podcast, please visit our website and click on Become a Guest in the main menu. Then fill out the form and click the Submit button. If you seem like a good fit for the show, we'll contact you via email. I guess it's time to head for the exits. We'll see you next time on Seeing Them Live.